Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 18th of April of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. But before we start, I would like to discuss with you one thing. Currently, if we ask ourselves, we have the most important questions connected and related to the Ukraine. 3 questions that we ask ourselves almost every single day. The first question is when the Russians are able to take control the entire Bakhmut. This is the first question, and we ask ourselves almost every single day. There were a lot of projections, a lot of speculation on that topic. Wagners themselves are saying that if they didn't have any problems in the past, they would be able to take control of Bakhmut even by the end of December, and so on. From my side, I made a small projection a few months ago that the Russians would be able to take Bakhmut before the 1st of April. Now we're like on the 18th of April, and we see that there are still 10% of Bakhmut under Ukrainian control, and so on. The second question we ask ourselves almost every single day is when and how the Ukrainians are going to launch unblocking operation of Bakhmut. We expected this operation at least to be started at least a few weeks ago, but there was a lot of rumors, a lot of talks, a lot of reports from Western sources, from Ukrainian sources, and all those reports are almost about the same thing, that the head of Defense Army, Syrsky, who is responsible for this defense operation, were saying to Zelensky almost all the time that because of bad weather, it was very difficult to start this counter-offensive or unblocking operation, because the quality of the ground is so poor, so that all the armored vehicles and tanks would stuck in this area. And that was his answer. Furthermore, a few days ago, maybe a week ago, there was another very interesting, maybe a joke or maybe not, who knows, I'm not sure, but that the Russians were using some kind of secret climate weapon to make a rain in this area, to make this area raining, so like to break any plan of the Ukrainians to start any counteroffensive or unblocking operation in this area. And the third question we ask ourselves every single day, when the Ukrainians are going to launch their greatest counteroffensive operation in Zaporozhye area. So these are 3 questions we are asking ourselves almost every single day. I don't know the answers to these questions, but I know for sure that within the next few days or weeks, we're going to receive the answers to every single question. We're going to receive the answer when the Russians are going to establish control of Bakhmut, or I believe that within the next few weeks the Russians are going to do this. When talking about the Ukrainian unblocking operation, I believe that the same period of time the Ukrainians will launch their counter-offensive operation, and all things all over the front lines, and all things when talking about political things, about the situation on the ground in the vicinity of Zaporozhye, tell us that the Ukrainians, also I would like to add the secret documents that were published in the open source, that Ukrainians are going to launch their counter-offensive operation in Zaporozhye almost at the same time. So now let's talk about everything about Ukraine in more details, and of course, first of all, we're going to start with Artyomovsk, but for now it's still Bakhmut. The Russians are saying that as a result of heavy clashes in this area during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost 219 soldiers, 12 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. Furthermore, the Russians managed to destroy another radar in this area, INTPQ-50. Furthermore, if you take a look at this map, the Russian source map has been updated. They have moved the gray line, and now the gray line goes along the street Krainia, this one, right to the railroad station. And this is very interesting update, and I'm not saying that I'm surprised, I'm just trying to say that, as I understand, nobody knows exactly the situation inside the western part of Bakhmut. Nobody knows. I believe that there is a very big, if we can talk like this, very big balagan in this area, and there are very heavy clashes, the buildings are destroyed, the buildings are blown up, the Ukrainians are sending more and more reserves, the Russians are pushing, they start using guided bombs. I still expect that the Russians are going to use the flamethrower system in this area and so on. For example, about these guided bombs and flamethrower systems, at least today, during this day of the local time, I received at least 3 a confirmation from different sources that there are no more civilians in the western part of Bakhmut. There are no more civilians, and of course it allows the Russians to act as they want. And of course, this is a very big pain for the Ukrainians because they don't have such types of weapons the Russians have, and they don't have such solutions from the Russian weapon to prevent or to reduce the damage from the Russians' weapon like guided bombs and flamethrower systems. I believe that the Russians are going to increase the pressure. It's like the third or fourth day in a row when the Ministry of Defense reported about more progress in this area, about more blocks that were taken by the Russians. Anyway, we can say that all the sources are saying that the Russians has reached the Crimea Street, and now there are heavy clashes inside the military base in the central part of Bakhmut. That opens the gate and the way to the final fortress in the western part of Bakhmut. For example, if we take a look at the deployment map, we see that this map has been updated, and this map shows more and more brigades inside of Bakhmut. Furthermore, if we take a look at the western deployment map, they show the same picture. They're saying that more brigades are deployed in the western Bakhmut. For example, according to this map, we can find this 97th Mechanized Battalion of 60th Mechanized Brigade. This is a very fresh update dated to the 16th of April. And many other updates. For example, 241st Territorial Defense Brigade on the 9th of April. This brigade used to stay in the northern part, but I believe that they were moved from this area. Maybe this is the reason of that update. And many other parts and brigades we can find in this part of Bakhmut. And this is very fresh and very recent updates and so on. For example, another Sheikh Mansour Chechen Battalion and so on. If we take a look at the Russian deployment map, we see that we can find another like battalion of Belarusian forces and so on. So we see that this area, even from this point of view, we see that this area is over-concentrated, is overpopulated with Ukrainian forces. And there are two questions. I have at least a few questions about this situation. Whether the Ukrainians are not able to evacuate from this area because of the fact that the Russians did really establish entire fire control over the roads with this town, or they're still planning to fight, and maybe they have a secret plan to start counter-offensive operation and to force the Russians to step back, at least from the western part of Bakhmut. There is a very low chances about this theory. I think that the Russians have established fire control over the roads, but we are not there. We haven't participated in these clashes, and we just can make conclusions on the things that we see based on the things that we see. So this about Artyomovsk and this about Bakhmut. Furthermore, when talking about this area, the Russians continue using guided bombs. They're attacking this town heavily, and the Ukrainians published a lot of photo, video messages saying that the situation became worse and worse every single day, becomes worse and worse every single day, and the reason is that beginning of the usage of these fat bombs, guided bombs. The Russians are saying that Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours made few attempts to send reinforcements to this town, but all those reinforcements were spotted and destroyed by the Russian artillery and artillery and air forces attacks. The Ukrainians sent some reserves, some forces from Chasov Yar and some Konstantinovka, and both attempts failed. Now let's go and let's talk about the second question is when the Ukrainians are going to launch their counter-offensive operation. I must say that the weather becomes better and better every single day, and sooner or later there are going to be no excuses for the Ukrainians and no things to tell that the weather is bad and it's rainy and the ground and the quality of the ground is poor. No. Anyway, I believe that this day is going to start very soon. And then the Ukrainians will take a decision. Do they need to do this or not? Anyway, as you can see, the Russians are saying that during the previous 24 hours, they continue attacking the Ukrainian positions in the vicinity of Slaviansk. The Ukrainians were attacked in the vicinity of Seversk, in the vicinity of Bilogorovka. Mainly the Russians were attacking the 81st Brigade, as we discussed. For example, when talking about the hottest point on the front lines, Artyomovsk, of course, we understand this, Avdiivka, but we see that recently the intensivity of clashes in this area was reduced from both sides. Maybe it's because of the fact that both parties managed to achieve some progress, or when talking about the Ukrainians, they managed to step back and maybe to stabilize the front line. But when talking about the second area where we can find the heaviest clashes, we can say that Bilogorovka is currently the second after Artyomovsk area about when talking about intensification of clashes and so on. The Russians are pushing in this area. They're attacking 81st Air Mobile Brigade, trying to push them and trying to force them to step back. When talking about the Western sources map, we can develop this map just to show the better picture. Currently, this is the main target of the Russians in this area. And some parts of this blue cloud has been already taken by the Russians. I'm talking the Kremenная forest, this area is under Russian control. And there is just two areas left, Sporne, the area in the vicinity of Sporne, and Bilogorovka itself. These two towns, this area will allow will open the Russian the gate and way or road to attack Siversk, and because the battle for Siversk is about to start. We can say that it has already started because Bilogorovka is a part of the battle for Siversk, but it's not Siversk. When talking about physical Siversk, this battle very soon is about to start. Now let's go north to the north and let's guess Kupiansk and Liman front line. It's very interesting front lines. They have separate forces are responsible for this area. We have separate reports about these areas, but we don't see like any activations in this area. During the previous months, the Russians had some activity. They were trying to push, they were trying to penetrate the Ukrainians and to get as close as possible to Tarskoye, Zarechna, Yampolovka, Terny, but now we see that they stopped. And we see that the recent updates are saying that they are not planning to restore this attack. I don't know, maybe the reason is that they understand that soon the Ukrainians are going to attack in the direction of Artyomovsk, Bakhmut or South Ukraine, so that's why they want to keep some reserves, to keep like fresh forces, to be flexible and to use them if it's necessary and to send them, let's say, to the south or in direction of Artyomovsk, Bakhmut. The Russians are saying that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 115 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles including 1 tank and 3 artillery systems. The Russians continue saying that as a result of artillery duels in the vicinity on the Kupiansk front line, they managed to break another rotation process and so on. But for example, today we got some of this from other sources that finally the Ukrainians managed to make at least a partial replacement, partial rotation in the vicinity of Tabaevka. They brought another 100 soldiers with its own armored vehicles on these positions. So we see that no matter the Russian attempts to break the Ukrainian rotation process, anyway, the Ukrainians still have possibilities to do this. I'm not saying that they're 100% successful and effective in this field, but anyway, they have possibilities to do this and they're doing this. Furthermore, if you take a look at Belgorod, the Ukrainians continue shelling and attacking Belgorod. And very slowly, step by step, we are going to the question when the Ukrainians are going to start their counter-offensive operation in this area. And today there was a very interesting piece of information, As far as I remember, maybe a few months ago, we discussed this situation, or maybe at least from my side, when I was trying to analyze this situation, I was trying to build my own projections, trying to understand the further plans and further steps from the Ukrainian side. And today, one of the sources at least confirmed a very old idea of mine. I don't remember if we discussed this idea, but some sources are saying that maybe the Ukrainians will try to. They're attacking Belgorod and the vicinity of Belgorod. There are very heavy clashes, bombing, drones attacks, missiles attacks, and so on. And some sources are saying that maybe the Ukrainians will try to attack the Russian territory, but not to get into the Russian territory, but to cross the border and then to turn to the south and to attack the Russians in their back, like to make a small hook by entering the territory of Russian Federation. From one side they're entering, but if they are successful, they will leave this territory very fast and go back to the south to the territory of Ukraine. Very interesting operation, and I believe that of course the Russians had some plans for these purposes, but nobody knows exactly what is going to be within the next 2 weeks and what direction the Ukrainians are going to use as the primary direction and which directions they're going to use as the secondary directions. Now let's go to the south, to the Donetsk. As you can see, Donetsk is under very heavy fire. The Ukrainians are shelling this area heavily. They're sending drones, they're sending commandos, scouts in this area. Furthermore, one of the most important updates came exactly from this area. As you know, today the president of Ukraine visited Avdiivka. He brought some kind of awards. He gave some awards to the soldiers in this area and so on. You know that if you ask me, if I see that Zelensky visited this or that place, for me that means that soon there are going to be very heavy clashes. During the previous months, Zelensky visited Avdiivka, visited Bakhmut, he visited Chastov Yar, and now we see what exactly is happening there. He is a very brave man if he visited Avdiivka being halfly encircled. Anyway, from the other side, we saw that these days, the president of Russian Federation visited the south of Ukraine. He was in the vicinity of Crimea. This is like an icon showing where exactly Putin visited Ukraine. So when talking about the president of Ukraine, he brought some awards and medals to the soldiers. When talking about president of Russian Federation, he brought Orthodox icon. We can say that both presidents were trying to bless their forces. The Russians were trying to bless the forces with belief and faith in God, and Zelensky was trying to bless his forces with medals, with metal icons and something like this. We'll see what is going to be next, but anyway, this is very interesting, and we see that both presidents are trying to bless and trying to give the final push before the final battle. I believe that both of them are afraid of this situation, because some of you is for the Russians, some of you are for the Ukrainians, but we understand that at least now nobody knows how the final battle is going to happen and what kind of results we're going to see after that battle. Everything can be completely different. The results can completely differ even from the things that we discuss on the daily basis. When talking about Ugledar, as we discussed during these days, the Ukrainians are making few attempts to attack Nikolskaya, Pavlovka. They're trying to fill the defense line, the combat line, trying to find the weakest position. Maybe the Ukrainians are going to use this direction at the second or main, but anyway, I believe that this activity shows that Ukrainians are trying to find the weak place. They're trying to find the minefields and so on, and of course they're trying to prepare themselves before upcoming offensive operation. Anyway, if you want to do anything, first you need to collect as much as possible information about this area. As you can see, if we take a look at the Zaporozhye area, you see that there are a lot of icons, and the Russians works actively, very actively in this area. Their artillery duels only intensifying in this area. The Russians are saying they're using guided bombs, artillery duels. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians destroyed at least few warehouses, ammo depots, at least 3. They destroyed a few artillery systems. They attacked few Ukrainian positions. They were using guided bombs. So as you can see, they're trying to attack and prepare the combat line before possible Ukrainian counter-offensive operation in this area. Now, when talking about this area, about Kherson and South Donetsk, the Russians destroyed 35 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 4 artillery systems from the Ukrainian side in this area. Another 30 was prepared by another report, and something like this. But now there is another very interesting update that coming exactly from Kherson and Zaporozhye area. And for these purposes, let's go back to the Western sources map. And as you can see, there is a very interesting icons along Dnipro River. This one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 icons. We discussed this situation in the previous videos. The Ukrainians, this is the icons, let's say, of a few reservoirs of water. As you know, there are a lot of dams along the Dnipro River, and every single pair of dams creates some kind of water reservoirs. So we can say that Ukrainians controls at least few reservoirs. The first one between Zaporozhye and Dnipro, the second one between Dnipro and Kremenchuk, the third one between Kremenchuk and, let's say, Kaniv, this area, the fourth one between Kaniv and Kiev, and the final one between Kiev and the territory of Belarus. So 5-6 water reservoirs that Ukrainians have, and these reservoirs are completely filled with water. And every single icon means that there is some kind of that the area in the vicinity of these icons are flooded because of overfilling of the water in this area. And possibly the Ukrainians are going to use this water in these water reservoirs as the part of offensive operation, counter-offensive operation in direction of Kherson area. And there are two possible solutions. There are a lot of solutions, of course, but I see few of them, just two or maybe more. The thing is that the first solution is the Ukrainians are going to keep this water in these water reservoirs, and they're not going to open the gates and to release the water to the south. In this case, the Ukrainians will try maybe to destroy the Novokakhovka dam, at least from their side, and to make this water reservoir empty. Some sources are saying that with this action, the Ukrainians will be able to reduce the level of water between Energodar and the Ukrainian towns on their bank of the river, like Zaporozhye, Nikopol, Marganets, and these all towns. And with help of this, they will be able to cross this water reservoir with armored vehicles that can use amphibious technologies, with boats and so on. So this might be a possible tactic for crossing the river and attacking in direction of Energodar. So this is the option if the Ukrainians are not going to release the water in Zaporozhye, Dnipro, but if they're going to destroy the dam in Novokakhovka. The second option is that the Ukrainians are not going to destroy the dam in Novokakhovka, but they're going to release the water from these water reservoirs step by step. In this case, we can say that because there are like 5-6 water reservoirs in this area, that means that Ukrainians can make at least 5 water strikes in direction of the South Ukraine, on the direction of Kherson. And of course, these 5 attacks will flood this area, and if we take a look at the trenches map and fortifications map, we see that the most of Russian fortifications are located along Dnipro River. I'm not saying that this map is up to date. Maybe this piece of information, this map is out of date or something like this, and maybe the Russians managed to prepare more trenches and fortifications, not along the Dnipro River, bank of Dnipro River, but maybe somewhere deeper inside the territory. But anyway, we understand if the Ukrainians are going to make few water attacks in the direction of South Kherson, the trenches along the river will be useless. The fortifications and trenches will be flooded and they will be useless. And of course, if a soldier doesn't have fortification or trenches, then this is a useless soldier, and he's like a primary target for the Ukrainians that are located on the hill in Kherson area. Because if we compare these two banks, Kherson is located on the hill and this bank is located on the lowland. And this will give the Ukrainians possibility also to make their these marine operations across the river and to attack the Russians, to push them back, and like to take this bank of this part of Kherson much easier in comparison with any other operation they can do in this area. And with this, they can start their offensive operation in direction of Crimea. And I'll remind you one more time that the head of intelligence of Ukraine told us that by the end of spring, the Ukrainians are going to enter Crimea. We'll see whether they're able to do this or not. But from the other side, we understand that during this winter, we expected the Russian greatest offensive operation. We were talking about that almost every single day, that during the winter the Russians were going to launch this operation, but the Russians haven't. They took a decision not to waste their reserves. As we see, the Russians haven't started the second wave of mobilization. They would do this in the future, but not now. They haven't launched, so they took a decision to work with the resources and assets they have right now. And the current situation is completely different from the situation we saw the last year when the Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive operation in Kherson and Kharkiv, because during those operations, the Russians had lack of manpower, and now the Russians have a lot of manpower. They have enough of manpower to stop any attack. Furthermore, as some sources are saying, the Russians managed to accumulate up to 100,000 reserves that currently are located not on the territory of Ukraine, but somewhere in Rostov-na-Donu, some forces located maybe in the vicinity of Belgrade, with one purpose: to have reserves to let's say, to prevent any penetration and to prevent any problem that Ukrainians are able to create for the Russians. And that's it for today. Military Summer channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.